I'm not supposed to be working today, and that's why you get this kind of video, despite the fact I'm actually in my studio. But I think there's a pressing question that we're dealing with right now, especially today, when everyone is remembering Charlie Kirk and following the assassination of Charlie Kirk. There is a rift happening on the right. It's been happening for some time, and it's in different areas. But the question is at which point someone forfeits their rights. And for the past week and a half or 2 weeks, there have been people on the right that have been sourcing statements, videos, whatever, from liberals who are celebrating Charlie Kirk's death or just smearing him and lying about him. They've been getting these people fired. Now, there have been a section of people associated with the right, conservatives, who say this is wrong. People have a right to free speech, and you shouldn't engage in cancel culture. And there are now these articles popping up saying, oh, the right has embraced cancel culture wholeheartedly. Well, I disagree. I think, first, there's a functional difference in what we are seeing with people losing their jobs, though I don't agree with all of it because some of it I would describe as cancel culture-ish. But the real question being asked, there's two. One is, what did we ever actually mean by cancel culture, and what was the limits in where we would decide when we would or would not take action against someone? I have always maintained that if someone says something shockingly offensive which would destroy your business, fire them. I mean, if you have a cafe and one of your employees shows up dressed in like a Klan robe or something, you're not going to sell any coffee. So that is reasonable. The issue with cancel culture, of course, for the longest time that I took issue with, and I think many did, was that they were sourcing things from the past, from a long time ago. Or in one really weird instance, you had a guy whose dad said a racial slur in the 80s. Was a NASCAR driver, and he lost his sponsors. Further, you had a Netflix executive who was explaining racial slurs, saying, hey, guys, these are bad words. And they went, oh, God, he said the word. And he got fired. It was actually, it's kind of funny as horrifying it is. He got called into an HR meeting, and they asked him what happened. And he said, I was just explaining the slurs that we're not going to allow on Netflix. And they're like, which are? And he said them. And they were, God, he said the words again. Seriously? So right now, on X, I should say the other day, I asked a question. The question is, what would the left or leftists have to do or collectively support for you to not defend them? Of course, the reaction is histrionics, which I would describe as the woke right, functionally identical to the woke left, but purporting to be conservative, or at least centrist. It's a legitimate and real question that any strong man, I mean that somewhat figuratively, would ask of his society. And there's a really easy way to understand what I'm talking about. Everybody has a right to life. You do. That's why you go to jail if you take away someone's life. There are certain circumstances, however, where we as strong men have decided even an individual can decide to end someone's right to life because they've crossed the line. Now, in certain circumstances, of course, this means typically in the United States, if someone is going to cause great bodily harm to you or to someone else or cause death to you or someone else. Now, that's really interesting, right? To cause great bodily harm. That means you don't need to be facing death in order to literally end someone else's life. That is, take away their life. They have a right to exist, to life. But we have said, you know what, man? You crossed a line. And when that line was crossed, you no longer have a right to life. And this manifests in several different ways, obviously with self-defense cases, where you will get someone, let's go with Michael Brown. Michael Brown tried to take the gun from Darren Wilson in Ferguson. Wilson shot him, and they said not guilty. Because what Michael Brown did, and this is according to Obama's DOJ, now we're getting political here already, but what Michael Brown did crossed the line. In fact, it wasn't even that we knew he was going to kill Darren Wilson or hurt him. It's the fear that he might. That's pretty crazy, right? If we're actually going to think about when you as an individual can say, I will terminate your life, you don't even need to prove that the person was going to kill you. You just need to prove you feared that he was going to cause great bodily harm. Okay. So now that we understand there's a general acceptance that though you have a right to freely move about the country, there are certain limitations, right? You can cross the line with your freedom of movement and have your movement restricted. Like if you freely move into a bank after it's closed, you will be arrested. It's burglary or someone's house. The same thing applies to any and every rights. However, there's an obvious issue, and it's that with murder, it's so shocking and so emotionally impactful. This one is easy for us to conceptualize. Like when someone you know or love dies, or even if someone you didn't know dies, we feel the severity of that. But throughout the purported rights that God has given us, and I say purported because in the Constitution, they say that we have these rights, and they gave us protections. It's fascinating that though we do have a right to live, there are many debates as to whether or not we can or cannot take someone's life. Abortion, death penalty. But more importantly, gun rights is where things start to get really interesting. And then as you move down the list, you'll notice that the infringement of our rights actually happens on a daily basis, but we don't really care. We kind of care, but we don't really care. In which case, the instances where our rights are infringed upon and we don't really care continue to get worse every single day. And so now the question is free speech, which falls into the First Amendment. So first, let me just say, as it pertains to gun rights, Constitution at the federal level makes it clear. The right to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. The people, right? And there's an argument over whether it's much, that doesn't matter. Across the board in many different states, they have created unique legislation pertaining to their states where they have infringed upon your right to keep and bear arms. And it's a constant battle where left and right, pro-gun, anti-gun, are trying to figure out where that limit is. We need to have that conversation as it pertains to speech. And I'll explain. The first thing I'll say is, and I perhaps somewhat derisively, is that when I asked what I viewed as a normal philosophical and moral question, our friend Seth Dillon over at the Babylon Bee seems to be unable to answer the question, instead resorting to histrionics and ad hominems, saying that Tim has changed and he's a leftist now. Because I asked you a question? Dude, answer the question. I think any man of good standing who wants to protect his society and humanity itself would ask these basic questions, the ones that I've already put forward. And so that question was, what could the left do or collectively support that would make you not support them? Serious question. Instead, the answer I got was, Tim is now a leftist, and this is the woke right, or whatever stupid garbled nonsense. Well, we have the answer to when you can take away someone's life. We generally accept that in society, though there's varying degrees. The left argues that police shouldn't have the right to end someone's life if they fear, because sometimes the fear is stupid. Imperfect self-defense. Still, it exists. It's been adjudicated, and we have a great long list of history. Now, the free speech is interesting. So I would put it like this. First, Seth Dillon takes issue with my statement to defend them, because he can't seem to understand we are talking about individuals who are engaging in an action who are now losing their jobs. That is, quite literally, there are leftists who are getting fired. To provide defense in this regard of the things they have said, because free speech is important, is in fact a defense of these particular leftists. Now, I'm not even saying that because my question was moral and philosophical. What would the left have to do? Honest question, and you can all comment and you can all answer this. What would they have to do or say to where you'd be like, when their rights are infringed upon, I will not defend them? And you are defending them. So let's go back to the murder question. The left has a very broad view of this. And that's why we often see murderers released from prison. That's why when this woman was brutally murdered, Irina Zarutska on a train, the left went, well, yeah, the murder is wrong, but this man was hurt. What did Van Jones say? He was hurting. He was hurting, so he hurt. And I'm sitting there being like, see, that's a defense of the murderer. We don't need to defend or in any way speak highly or in any way positively or in any way defensively. But let's say it again. I think anyone can recognize if this man just slashed this girl 3 times in the neck, murdering her. In a couple minutes, she was gone. You don't need to say anything about the man other than what he did was evil. He took a life. We recognize that, right? I think so. But leftists don't. They actually come to his defense. Now with the issue of Charlie Kirk, we have something similar. These individuals are lying about Charlie. They are making up fake quotes. Why, just the other day, look at me, I'm working on a weekend. Just the other day, I was talking to a man. He's a good guy. He's an older guy. And he was saying things that were just not true. And he said he didn't like Charlie, but nobody should die that way. I said, but what didn't you like about Charlie? Certainly there's things you can disagree with him on, of course. The reality, the left has spread so many lies about who Charlie was that many of the default liberals now, they kind of shrug and they're like, well, you know. And so here's where the problem arises, in my view. With these people losing their jobs, some of them should not lose their jobs. Some of them I don't care about. It's a ridiculous reality where even during the height of cancel culture, we had individuals who were fired for something they said 10 years prior. And I said, that's insane. But we also had people who were fired for things that you probably shouldn't say when you're on the job. And I said, look, you have no right to employment. There's a difference. And so the left was willing to take your job from you because you praised Trump. I mean, that is not objectionable. And so it was a combination of things. And I will absolutely defend many of these individuals I have. Notably in 2018, when the alt-right, white nationalists, who I don't agree with, who actually don't like me, the mixed race Tim Pool, right? Were getting banned. I said, this is wrong. They should not be banned because they were being banned simply for having the opinion. Now, hold on. Jimmy Kimmel is not a case of cancel culture. And I will not defend this man. He was warned by the executives. He wanted to double down. I know I don't have, normally I pull up all this stuff, but I'm here doing it on a phone thing. Wall Street Journal Hollywood reporter reporting that the executives came to him, actually were on his side, and he said he wanted to condemn MAGA again the next day for twisting his words. They were like, dude, advertisers and affiliates are not going to have this. Well, where are we at now? Liberals believe that Donald Trump made a personal phone call demanding that he be taken off the air. Now, there's no evidence of that. So this is not a case of cancel culture. This is a business saying our advertisers are mad. They don't want to be associated with what it is you're saying. And what you said was objectionable. You don't do it. Jimmy Kimmel said, I'm going to do it anyway. See, he had an opportunity, an option more so than people on the right. But let's get to brass tacks. So I'm not rambling, right? I look at what the left is doing right now, lying about Charlie Kirk. AOC went on the floor of the House and lied about what Charlie Kirk believed. Now, the question I have is, why do that? And why does the left do these things? They lie all the time. The function of my business, largely because I'm the milquetoast fence sitter, is debunking the lies, which is why many other conservative shows get way more views than Timcast does, because I'm not a conservative. I just don't like these liars. And that is the function of what I do largely. Though I do have my opinions, of course, on free speech and gun rights. I'm largely, I would say, I'm not a free speech absolutist. I think that's silly. But I do believe in a broad free speech. That means I don't agree with what you say, but good sir, I will defend to the death your right to say it. To a limit, right? When someone tries kicking your door in and they have a gun, are these conservative types, these woke right dudes, going to come out and be like, well, hold on, I'm going to defend the guy who did that? Listen, I understand it was bad that he trespassed on your, let's lighten it up. Let's lighten it up. Because self-defense varies by state, and there are certain circumstances where there may be a defense of the intruder. Let's say I'm on my property in West Virginia, and there's a man lurking about, bypassing our security perimeter and guards with a long gun and body armor. And one of my guards sees the guy, yells, the guy turns quickly. The guard says, holy crap, this guy is about to engage. And so he shoots and kills him. Now, he was trespassing. He had bypassed a security perimeter. This is already, and I don't know about West Virginia, but in some states it's burglary to bypass a barrier. Now, what if the guy had no intention of murder? Would you defend him? The reality is most people would not. They'd be like, well, let's be real. You're wearing body armor and you have a gun and you trespass onto someone's property? I have nothing nice. Are you going to be like, listen, man, I think people have a right to life and it's wrong that he died? I'd say it's unfortunate that he died, but he took an action that crossed the line, and this we recognize legally. Now, as it pertains to free speech, we have a similar question. What the left is doing is objectionable, and I think half of them should be fired for it. There's people who are dancing on his grave, saying more people deserve this. Fire him in 2 seconds. Why? Those are death threats, okay? And it borders on whether it's illegal. Now, they're not necessarily creating a threat of imminent harm, but I do think that is a line. Dancing on Charlie's grave is the line. I take personal offense to it. You're allowed to do it. Here's the thing. I ain't going to defend you. I'm not going to come out and be like, oh, woe is me. I must defend this person, because there is a question you must ask yourself. At what point do you not defend the actions an individual took or as a collective? What would they have to do to where you say, okay, I'm stepping back from this one? And the argument from these woke right guys is that we must always defend free speech. Okay, well, that's not true. That is, I would call that civic illiteracy. Because as it pertains to all of our rights, we do not defend every single instance. We just don't. We don't defend every instance where an individual moves about. We don't defend every instance where a person has a weapon. Even when I ask people the right to keep and bear arms, they say no biological weapons and no nuclear weapons. And I'm like, you've decided when you get to infringe on someone's rights. Why would speech be excluded from that? The reality is, people have limits. They have their own moral worldview, and they decide when it is right and when it is wrong. And we have constitutional guidelines, meaning the government can't infringe upon our rights. What I will say is this. It is laughably absurd that you have these people on the right, first of all, to Seth Dillon, being like, Tim's on the left now. What? You're not even answering the question that I asked you. I can answer the question for you. When the left is going on the floor of the House, or I should say this, prominent leftists like AOC goes on the floor of the House, lies about what Charlie Kirk believes. There is one reason to do that, and it's not to criticize Charlie Kirk's ideas, because if she actually presented his real ideas, she'd be criticizing them. Instead, she is lying about what Charlie Kirk actually believed. A good example, I'm seeing a lot of people say this, is that Charlie Kirk said the Civil Rights Act was a mistake. The assumptive reasoning they're presenting, the manipulation tactic, they want you to believe that Charlie Kirk thought black people shouldn't have rights. Charlie Kirk went into great detail about why it was a mistake, and he said the intention was good. We should have protected rights for all people, regardless of race and otherwise. However, a 100-page, multi-title bureaucratic mess created a bunch of slop in government, which bogs us down and doesn't actually answer the questions. Okay, you don't have to agree with him on that, but Charlie Kirk certainly was not saying that black people didn't deserve rights, so why push that idea? There's only one reason. The simple from the highest level. There's actually two reasons, but when I'm referring to like AOC, come on, she's smart. She knows that what she is saying is not true. She knows. What she is doing is she's creating a buffer. There are people who are very worried about political violence, and they're scared, having witnessed Charlie die. But was it really us, they ask? It couldn't have been us, so what are the first thing they do? They blamed Nick Fuentes. They said the Groypers did it. Okay, well, all evidence right now indicates this guy was left-aligned. There were left-aligned trans individuals who appear to have foreknowledge. We don't know what the link is just yet, but left-aligned seems to be the case. Well, nobody wants to admit it. Nobody wants to accept it if it's their ideology that motivated someone to go kill another person. Charlie Kirk, in the FBI statement, this shooter said, allegedly from the government, some hate you can't negotiate with. Okay. So when AOC goes out and she lies, what she is doing is, I would describe it as a cultural buffer. She may as well just say, don't feel bad that he died. We know it's wrong to kill, but look how evil Charlie was. And so these liberals who don't really pay attention, and I have conversations with them, are manipulated into saying, yeah, murder's wrong, but that Charlie was a bad person. But, no, the murder was wrong no matter what. The but is to make them feel like it's not that bad. There's no reason to say this. You know, these people in Minnesota, these lawmakers, were killed. And what did we say? This is terrifying. It's horrible. This shouldn't have happened. Oh my God. And there's a debate between the left and the right as to whether or not the guy was right wing or left wing. With the right saying, but he was a Waltz appointee. You know, in reality, they also say that he was a registered Republican. And I look at the available facts and I say, I don't know. Was it a crazy guy? Because there are shooters who defy politics. But I certainly recognize when the left is upset. But the right doesn't advocate for murder in this way. They don't. When they say that the right is violent or extreme, they're referring to non-mainstream ideologies. Like Charlie Kirk kicked white identitarians out of his events. And this goes back decades. Like when he was a young man, there's a bunch of videos of it. He's like, get out of here. You know, you don't belong here. You're not part of this movement. Fan of Clarence Thomas told people that being gay didn't define them and said they were welcome in the movement. So while certainly I think it's fine to just say, hey man, if a Trump supporter shot and killed a guy, we all recognize that was a bad thing. Thank you and have a nice day. And we will make sure to reject and denounce violence anywhere we can. Now with the shooter in Utah, first, liberals celebrated it. Okay. There's some instances that I've personally seen where I thought this person should not lose their job. Look, they spread lies about Charlie, but these are low-level people who don't know what they're talking about. Someone published their information and they got fired from the store they worked at or something. And I'm just like, you know, it didn't work when they did it to the right. It's not going to work now. So I largely believe in free speech. As for AOC, some of these higher profile people, Jimmy Kimmel, for instance, no. When you ask me, what could someone do where you wouldn't defend them? Let me put it like this. Trayvon Martin is a very interesting story. He was walking around lawfully. He was going to buy, what was he getting, Arizona and some Skittles, I think, when Zimmerman saw him. Zimmerman saw him as suspicious and he was doing neighborhood watch or something to that effect. Trayvon Martin didn't break any laws. He was freely moving about the area, as he is allowed to do. Am I going to defend Trayvon Martin? You could. You could say he didn't deserve to die, for one. That's true. But you could also be like, this was a terrible instance. We must protect people's right to freedom of movement, regardless of what a neighborhood watch might think. This shouldn't happen. And I say, hold on there a minute. There is contention in this whole story. But what it comes down to is the reason for the altercation is immaterial to the fact that Zimmerman was also allowed to patrol his neighborhood and take issue with people he didn't recognize. How the fight started, we don't know. But Zimmerman was getting punched in the face and was being ground and pounded. Trayvon was on top of him. Zimmerman shot him once in the chest, killing him. I wish he didn't die. However, am I going to say the right of freedom of movement is absolute and it's not about defending what he did? It's about defending the right, therefore the shooting was wrong? It's a more extreme scenario because someone's dead. But let's ask ourselves this question about what the left is doing. Jimmy Kimmel lying about who the shooter was, despite the fact all information is available, and he's got a massive research team. You know he knows he's lying. So while I do take issue to a certain degree that he lost his job, just like I don't want Trayvon to die, I am not going to come out and defend him. If a leftist gets fired or banned, I'm going to say, well, you know what? At a certain point, they've crossed the line. And while I will defend free speech, there is a limit to where I think it's wrong that they get fired, but I'm not going to stick my neck out for him. It is wrong that Trayvon died. I'm not going to stick my neck out for him. He was on top of a guy wailing on him for whatever reason. And maybe it's, the debate is, he was scared and being chased. So when the guy confronted him, he fought back. Yeah, maybe. No, I'm not going to do it. I don't have the information to say that I will. Then we escalate this to the next point. And that is these woke right guys. Seth Dillon is a really great example. James Lindsay, and they purport to have some right-leaning views, but they act wholly like leftists. That is, Liberals should always be defended, can do nothing wrong in this instance. And they collectively demonize the right, despite the nebulous or vague political ideologies of the right. This is what the woke right are doing. And I know some are confused and they're like, what is this term? Well, I'll break it down for you. Woke right is used by these people vaguely, the same way alt-right was used. It means literal nothing. They lump in libertarians, conservatives, literal anti-Semites, MAGA, just like nationalists. One category, woke right. And you can't discern what it is. Well, I've used the term woke right in the past before they started screaming about it. And my view is that it refers to people who are liberal leaning, but purport to be on the right, but will defend wokeness and use woke tactics, such as collective demonization. When they say that everyone on the right is the exact same thing, I'm like, oh, hold on. Like, I personally, I can tell you the difference between a liberal and a leftist, a moderate default lib, a staunch, neo-lib. Like, there's a difference here. And I use those distinctions when I discuss this. So to claim that literally everybody on the right is woke right when they disagree with you is literally what the left has always done. They called everyone on the right alt-right or white supremacist. They lump you into one category. And then when a white supremacist shoots somebody, they say, that was Charlie Kirk. And I'm like, no, Charlie Kirk opposed that stuff. This is a different ideology. So right now what I see is, I ask a very simple question. In running any civilization, a strong man must ask, at what point is it acceptable to infringe upon the rights of somebody? Slavery is legal, so long as you've been duly convicted of a crime. That's the 13th Amendment. So it's not that this country believes slavery is wrong. They say that, but the 13th Amendment actually says, unless you've been convicted of a crime, literally any crime, jaywalking. Not that we do that. In this instance, I will say it like this. People are losing their jobs. I lament the fact that many of them are, because some of them, I think, have said things that are just offensive, but not offensive enough to lose your job over. But I'm not going to defend them. I'm not going to come out and defend people. Why? When there is a man pounding on my door, screaming to let him in, and that he's got a gun, I am not going to reach my neck out in any way to offer him any kind of support. That's just it. These woke right guys are pretending like there is not a serious threat that we face. Charlie was just killed. He's not the only one. Apparently, they're reporting that this ABC that got shot up, it was some liberal guy. Someone shot up a country club screaming, "Free Palestine." You're allowed to say those things, but I'm not going to defend the left when they advocate for death and murder. And my point is this. The intention of these high-profile liberals, and I don't mean leftists, the intention when there's multiple tiers to this. Call for more death? Yeah, it's to get people like me killed, and I have to deal with that. When they lie about who Charlie was, that is to justify his killing, so you don't feel bad. Yes, we can stand on the high ground and say it was wrong, but he was evil. Why would I stand up for them? Someone comes and says, you're objectionable, you're fired. I'll be like, well, you shouldn't have threatened me. You shouldn't have participated in the threats against my life. Now, I know what they're going to say. They're going to say, this is objectionable with the left. No. The left was getting people banned for things that weren't otherwise objectionable or threats to someone's life. So the people who are going online and saying, here's who's next, ban them all. That's not cancel culture. The people who are at their jobs and saying it was good that Charlie died, ban them all. Fire them. It's not I'm saying it is not objectionable to fire them. What they're doing is, if I worked at a bakery and my staff was gloating and saying it's good that he's dead, I'll be like, yo, we can't function as a business if you're doing this. And I said the same thing back when they were firing people for naughty opinions. The issue with cancel culture is if the thing being said is not objectionable. But you could be fired from your job if you are a dick. So here we are now. And the reason I'm making this video is these people are wholly unserious, these woke right guys. Seth Dillon. They won't answer the question. They took me asking the question, and instead of answering a legitimate philosophical and moral question, what did he say? Tim has changed and now he's on the left and I defend free speech. I've never defended the left. Okay, well, that's just an absurdity. I asked you a question. In fact, I didn't even accuse him of defending the left. He responded with, when did you stop beating your wife? What? I asked you a question. What would the left have to do for you to say I'm not going to defend them? I didn't say you defended them. I'm saying, at what point would you be like, I'm staying out of this? For me, it was, you have to recognize when you're at war. And I know that the response from the liberals and these woke right guys is going to be like, we are not at war. It's a culture war. Stop being so willfully obtuse. They are seeking to crush our worldview and way of life, our rights to speak. They censored Alex Jones without cause. And the liberals are like, but he said bad words about the Sandy Hook. Yeah, that's libelous or defamatory or whatever you want to argue. That is a civil matter, not a destroy a man's business and fire all his staff matter for his opinions. To make the argument, but what he was saying was resulting in death threats. Well, make the argument. You don't have to defend Alex Jones. I will make the same argument. I don't have to defend Jimmy Kimmel. You have to recognize at some point there is a front. The left, leftists, progressives, and aided by default libs initiated a cultural conflict where they sought to eradicate our moral worldview. Twitter is a great example with misgendering. When they said, if you misgender someone, you're banned. What? I mean, that's not even, what is this? Half the country disagrees. How you do? They did it. They banned Gavin McInnes for simply starting the Proud Boys. He didn't say anything that got him banned. You make the argument about Alex Jones, fine, but Gavin McInnes didn't. Only now he just got brought back to X and he's still banned from everywhere else because he started a club called the Proud Boys, which eventually the Proud Boys got political. And they say, we have to defend them. No. They argue it's about defending free speech. I argue this. I defend the rights of those who believe in the rights. I defend those. You can be a communist or a leftist or otherwise. And if you say, no, I'm going to win this in the battle of ideas, I say, okay. All right, I'll defend your free speech. I'll speak out if someone comes to silence you. I will not do this anymore for those who are trying to destroy my speech. I will not defend the free speech of people who are actively trying to subvert my rights. Now, hold on. I'm not saying they're speaking out against me. I'm saying I will not defend the free speech of people who are using physical force, violence, advocating or justifying that against me. I'm going to step back and be like, these people are dangerous, and I will be left out of it. Because I will not take an action that will be a detriment to myself. Now, of course, this is the argument they're going to make. It's illiberal. You're not defending free speech anymore. The principle is gone. I'll say it again. I'll put it like this. Soleimani got blown up. People cheered for it. Not everybody, but people did. Nobody banned him. Even though the rules on YouTube say that you can't celebrate death. Oh, so here's a question I have. Why was it okay? You can't celebrate death, they say on YouTube, but celebrating Soleimani's death wasn't a bannable offense because he's an enemy combatant in a foreign land. That's it. The reality of rights is that we do not care for the rights of people who are outside of our society. A little bit, sometimes. But you know people don't care. Nobody cares if the U.S. is suppressing speech in foreign countries. Nobody is arguing about how Twitter was censoring people in foreign countries. Nobody in America cared. Because these people aren't part of our society. What we care about is when our government, which is supposed to be of, for, and by the people, infringes upon the rights of our fellow citizens. Here's a question for you. As they celebrate the death of Charlie Kirk, justify it, and smear his good name, do you view them as working towards your view of society? The truth is this, and I quote Stephen Marsh, there are two nations occupying the land of the United States, a multicultural democracy and a constitutional republic. Now, for me, that was I'm paraphrasing him, but that's basically what he said. I'm of the constitutional republic. The people of the multicultural democracy that want open borders, that want to release criminals, that said the murderer of Irina Zarutska was just hurting, so he hurt, or that Charlie Kirk was an evil racist bigot, or that I deserve to die next. I'm not going to stick my neck out to defend their jobs or their free speech. I am not going to criticize those that are actually that are getting them fired. It's not happening. I am also simultaneously not going to come out and demand that China grant all free speech to the people of China, because I don't live in China. China's their own country. I'm not going to demand that foreign nations live by the American moral worldview. I'd prefer it, and we can win that argument. But the idea that we are going to dispatch USAID to these countries, I'm against it. These countries can be their countries. If they engage in serious evils, there are certain circumstances where I think we do intervene. But for the most part, these people in the United States who say they believe in free speech, they're not going to defend the free speech rights of those in Eritrea, one of the most restrictive countries on the planet. I don't see anybody, because they don't care, because Eritreans are not their friends. And at the same time, the Iranians and otherwise, these people aren't going to defend them either. People who are actively trying to kill us, the Russians, whatever it may be, people are not defending their right to speak in this country, to advocate for our death and destruction. So I'm not going to play that game with the left. When foreign countries engage in influence operations, no matter what it may be, it's bad. And yeah, Russia too. Despite whatever lies they want to put out, I will agree. I don't care what country it is. India, Pakistan, China, injecting fake ideas into our culture through social media to manipulate our people. Not a good thing. Am I going to defend their right to do it? No, I'm not. But China has a right to... No, they don't. China does not have a right to free speech as a country in our country. And the founding fathers could not have envisioned this. And here we go. Tell me I can't have nuclear arms. The Constitution says shall not be infringed, but you've decided that, haven't you? Well, I decide this. The founding fathers weren't aware of fast as light communications, instant data transmission. So if you ask them the question, should the Chinese government be able to come and speak freely in this country as to the detriment and demise of this nation, they'd say, no, that's sedition. Indeed. So I ask you this. You need only figure out when the line has been crossed for you. And what I see from the left is the imprisonment of their political opponents, the murder of their political opponents. They hunted down people. They put Trump in jail twice. They lied, they cheated, and they stole. They created fake laws so that Trump could be prosecuted and persecuted. They claimed he engaged in fraud when he didn't. They arrested his lawyers. So just like I'm not going to come out and be like, these Chinese individuals who are advocating my death should have the free speech to do so, I'm not going to do it for the left. Do I believe in free speech? Yes. Within the confines of my society and my government, of for and by the people of my country, and for those of all good moral standing who would defend the rights of others. That means the people of China. That means the people of Iran. It means the functioning idea of free speech is that we together say, you speak freely, I speak freely. How about that? But what happens when that person says, I will do whatever I can to take that right from you? I say, I'm not going to let you exploit me. So, did I need to say 40 minutes on this one? Probably not. But, yeah, you know me. I got a lot to talk about. I'll leave it there. Welcome to the channel. Smash the like button. Share the show. Thanks for hanging out. Wow, if you've listened to this for this long, comment and let me know what you think. Happy Sunday, everybody. See y'all later.